Did you know that there was a time when an entire city was surrounded by the world's most powerful dictator, and its only hope of survival was planes flying from the sky? Yes, this is not a movie, but a moment in history known as the Berlin Airlift. That was 1948, when the Cold War first truly took hold of the world. On one side was the United States and its allies, and on the other, the Soviet Union. Berlin became the center of the world, a city that breathed hope, fear, hunger, and politics. If you think that airplanes only fly to fight wars, you're wrong. This time the planes saved lives, not took them. Let's go back in time. World War II was over, Germany had been defeated, and Berlin, once a shining city, was reduced to rubble. But even though the war was over, the world did not rest. Now a new war had begun, the Cold War. The United States, Britain, and France occupied the western part of Berlin, while the Soviet Union took control of the eastern part. But the problem was that the entire city was located in the middle of Soviet territory. In a way, West Berlin had become a small island in the Soviet Sea, and Stalin did not like that at all. In the summer of 1948, the Soviet Union took a surprising step. It blocked all land and rail routes to West Berlin. That meant no food, no coal, no medicine. The goal was clear: to force the Western powers to abandon Berlin. Stalin thought, starve them, let them freeze, they will surrender themselves. But he underestimated American determination. The United States and Britain decided that if the earth is closed, then the sky is open. And so began the greatest humanitarian mission in history. You might be wondering, how is that possible? Keeping an entire city alive only with airplanes? Sure, that sounds crazy, but it was true. On June 26, 1948, the first American plane landed at Tempelhof Airport in West Berlin. It wasn't just food, it was hope. Hundreds of planes flew every day. These planes were called Rosinenbomber, meaning raisin bomber, because the pilots brought sweets to children. This wasn't just an operation, it was a promise that we will not leave you alone. The brainchild of this airlift was one man, General Lucius D. Clay. He was a tough but honest soldier. He sent a clear message to Washington: if we leave Berlin today, Europe will leave us tomorrow. And that decision turned out to be the one that changed history. It soon became known as Operation Vittles, an incredible mission, with more than 277,000 flights. Just think, a plane was landing or taking off in the skies over Berlin every 3 minutes. This wasn't just a military mission, it was a humanitarian mission. When American pilot Gail Halson saw the hungry children of Berlin, he did something unique. He wrapped the chocolate in his pocket in a small handkerchief and threw it down during the flight. The children happily raised their hands to the sky. Soon he and the pilots launched Operation Little Vittles. Thousands of candy. Parachutes began to fall from the sky. That scene, as if hope was raining from heaven. But it was not all easy. The weather was snowy. The Berlin sky was filled with fog. The pilots had to risk their lives every day. Sometimes they ran out of fuel. Sometimes the plane skidded off the runway. And yes, sometimes Soviet warplanes would come close and try to scare them. But no one gave up. One pilot wrote in his logbook, "We fly with death every day, but we bring life." The Soviet Union was constantly spreading propaganda. It was saying that the United States wanted to take over Berlin, but the truth was completely the opposite. The general public began to believe that the West was their friend. This was the moment when the hearts of the people of Berlin were won. Children began to learn the names of American pilots. Women brought food to the airports, and men helped unload the goods. This was not a city versus the world, but a man versus hunger war. Every day, 5,000 tons of food and coal were delivered to Berlin. Imagine it was as if an entire mountain was being dropped from the sky every day. But the amazing thing was that it all happened with a difference of a second. If one plane was a little late, another could have crashed. It was the largest flight coordination in the world, without any GPS, without any advanced computers, just determination, radio, and faith. And then one day, a miracle happened. Where Stalin had hoped that Berlin would kneel, it turned out the other way around. The people of West Berlin grew stronger. They said, "We will survive even if the earth closes. The sky is ours." The world was shocked. The Soviet Union saw that its plan was failing. People began to see America not as an enemy, but as a savior. And this was the moment when the first victory of trust in the Cold War took place. In May 1949, almost a year later, Stalin lifted the blockade. He realized that he could not break the morale of the Western powers. But the loss was his: political, moral, and ideological. The people of Berlin paid the price for their freedom with courage. On that day, when the first land route opened, people took to the streets waving banners and waving at American planes. That joy, those tears, everything became a symbol of a new beginning. But the impact of the airlift was not limited to Berlin. It sent a message to the whole world that America and the Western world would not bow to Soviet pressure. That airlift led to the formation of NATO, a defense alliance that still stands today. In fact, the Berlin Airlift solidified the foundation of the Cold War, a war fought more with ideas than bullets. Now imagine, if America had backed down at that time, perhaps Berlin would be another Pyongyang today, closed, silent, and shrouded in fear. The airlift is not just an event, it is a symbol of human courage, friendship, and determination. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest power is not guns, but compassion. Historians still debate debate whether the airlift was a political victory or a show of humanitarian compassion. Some say it was a PR success for America. Some say it was the greatest relief operation in human history. Perhaps both are right, because the truth is that if it weren't for politics, those planes might not have flown. And if it weren't for humanity, those planes would never have reached their destination. When we see a plane in the sky today, we may not remember that those same wings once saved a city, but the elders of Berlin still haven't forgotten that day, when they looked up at the sky and thought, they're coming. Our heroes are coming. The Berlin Airlift is not just a historical event. It's a promise written in the sky of humanity, that where oppression builds walls, hope soars. The Berlin Airlift also created a new diplomatic reality. America realized that if Europe is to be truly free, military power alone is not enough. It has to win hearts. And that was the moment when the Marshall Plan, the European Recovery Plan, took off. Western Europe saw new paths to development, while Eastern Europe was buried under the Iron Curtain. It wasn't just a difference of geography, but of thought. Freedom on one side, control on the other. And Berlin that became a mirror between the two. Interestingly, during the airlift, the Soviet media tried to convince the people of Berlin that the West was deceiving them. But that plan backfired, because when the children of Berlin caught chocolate parachutes falling from the sky, they didn't see propaganda. They saw love. They knew that somewhere, someone cared about them. It was that human touch that brought warmth to the icy atmosphere of the Cold War. Now think about it. If you were in Berlin at that time, no electricity, no food, no fuel, but every night you could hear the sound of planes roaring in the sky. That sound was not of fear, but of hope. A mother would say to her child, look, they're coming. An old man would raise his hand in greeting. Those planes brought not only supplies, but also encouragement. And that was what Stalin did not have, the power to win the hearts of men. During the airlift, the United States delivered about 2.3 million tons of supplies. It is amazing to think that an average of 6,000 flights were taking place every day. This was no less than a combat operation. Snow, fog, night, everything got in their way, but humanity won. An American pilot said, "We did not drop bombs on an army, we dropped hope." Isn't this phrase enough for history to know that sometimes humanity also takes flight? The Berlin Airlift made another thing clear: the cold. War was not just a war of borders, but a war of ideologies. On the one hand, freedom, capitalism, and democracy. On the other, control, state power, and fear. Berlin became the battlefield of this ideological battle. And the interesting thing is that this war was fought without a single bullet. The planes did not drop shells, but food. This was the first message from the West. We have come not to fight, but to live. Decades later, when the Berlin Wall fell, many people said the wall began to fall the day the first American plane landed in Berlin. That's true, because a seed was sown that day, of freedom, of faith, and of solidarity. The airlift didn't just save Berlin. It gave the Western world an idea that silence is resistance in the face of oppression, and that humanity is the greatest strength. Now let's talk about the characters. Besides General Clay, there are thousands of names that the world doesn't know. Those pilots, mechanics, engineers, nurses who worked day and night. No one took time off to go home. No one cared about their pay. Some of them never returned. Their planes were lost in the snow. But their sacrifices showed the world that saving one life is like saving all of humanity. The airlift also created a new narrative in the Western media. Pictures, news reports, and documentaries portrayed America as a hero. But interestingly, ordinary German people also realized their mistakes. For the first time since the war, they saw the West as a friend, not an enemy. This was the moment when hostility was replaced by trust, and this was perhaps the greatest gift of the Berlin Airlift, the restoration of humanity. Some historians have said that the airlift was a psychological war. They may have been right. But whatever it was, no bullets were fired in that war, but hearts were changed. The Soviet Union showed its strength, but America showed its spirit. And in the end, strength lost, spirit won. If history were ever called upon, it would surely say, this time man won, not politics. Today, when we look at people caught up in Ukraine, Gaza, or any other crisis, the question arises, is there still an airlift left in the world? Can any country still risk its life for humanity today? Maybe yes, maybe no. But one thing is certain. The Berlin Airlift reminds us that when all else fails, the sky is still open. Some call the airlift a propaganda masterstroke. And perhaps they are not wrong, because it not only saved Berlin, but also restored America's reputation. After World War II, the world saw a new America, one that was both powerful and compassionate. And this balance was rare in the world politics of that time. The Berlin Airlift showed that the real meaning of power is not just winning wars, but winning hearts. For the people of Berlin, this airlift was nothing short of a miracle. Every morning they looked at the sky, praying that the planes would come today too. The sound of these planes was a lullaby to them, a song. Children imitated airplanes with their toys. They were convinced that the world had not forgotten them. If ever there was hope, it would certainly be in the form of a DC-3 or a C-54 Skymaster. After the end of the airlift, the United States built a memorial in Berlin. It was named Luftbrückendenkmal, Air Bridge Monument. It has 3 wings, a symbol of 3 air corridors, each wing for the flights that never returned. This statue still stands today, as if silently saying, we learned to fly, because the earth abandoned us. Time passed, the Cold War ended, the wall fell, but the story of the Berlin Airlift lives on. It is taught in schools, documentaries are made, and Airlift Day is celebrated every year on May 12th. Those pilots, those children, those mothers, all are still on the horizon of history, because some stories never end, they always fly. So friends, the Berlin Airlift doesn't just teach us history, it teaches us a lesson in humanity. That sometimes power comes not from cannons, but from birds. Sometimes it takes a heart, not a gun, to win a war, and sometimes hope is something that falls from the sky, a candy wrapped in a parachute. Now the question is, if the world were to face another Berlin today, would we be able to rain hope down from the sky again? Tell us in the comments. If you were in Berlin at that time, would you have believed that heaven could really send help?